In this video, Dr. C.R. Oliver presents an in-depth study on Nehemiah chapter 1 through 13 entitled, Objections Overruled. Introduction. It would seem these days that no matter which plan or program a nation, church or individual chooses, someone is there to object. Such acidity is not new to this world. Nehemiah faced it several times and with the help of the Almighty, overcame the objectors. In this study, our text will seek to reveal how Satan's plans have changed little over time. Although there are obviously times when one must object when sin and error is chosen, but our study focuses on the dark side of matters, where righteousness and holiness are the enemy of the objectors. First, let us review the players. Nehemiah, and the returning workers from the Babylonian captivity. Tobiah, Sanballat and Gershom, the Arab, Samaritans with an unrighteous cause. Traitorous nobles infiltrating the camp of Israel and lending aid to the above. Priests who aligned with Tobiah and even assisted him in the Jerusalem temple. Many scenes from the scriptures show the objectors using scurrilous methodologies to thwart the work of the Lord. These same tactics are at work today. They use rage, ridicule, blackmail, falsehood, criticism, defamation of character, seduction, conspiracy, threats, armed aggression and betrayal. They mix into it rumor, fear tactics and lies. Nehemiah combated their harassment with a mandate from heaven, a righteous cause, and by overruling their assessments. The study. Nehemiah, a trusted member of the king of Persia's inner corps of workers, was trained to recognize intrigue, conspiracy and disloyalty. He is the king's cupbearer, who tests those things the king imbibed with his very own life. If he drinks or eats poison, he dies, not the king. His righteous work ethic is exemplary, though a servant, he is fiercely loyal. But he is greatly upset about a report he heard revealing the struggling difficulties of those who returned to Jerusalem. Their city was unprotected, as was the temple. Zerubbabel and Ezra have been long ago dispatched to rebuild, and yet the walls are in rubble. His concern over this causes him to pray a prayer of intercession. Nehemiah chapter 1 verses 4 through 11. When I heard these words, that I sat down and wept, and mourned for many days, I was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, I pray, Lord God of heaven, O great and awesome God, you who keep your covenant and mercy with those who love you and observe your commandments, please let your ear be attentive and your eyes open, that you may hear the prayer of your servant which I pray before you now, day and night, for the children of Israel your servants, and confess the sins of the children of Israel which we have sinned against you. Both my father's house and I have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you, and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, nor the ordinances which you commanded your servant Moses. Remember, I pray, the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations, but if you return to me, and keep my commandments and do them, though some of you were cast out to the farthest part of the heavens, yet I will gather them from there, and bring them to the place which I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. Now these are your servants and your people, whom you have redeemed by your great power, and by your strong hand. O Lord, I pray, please let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant, and to the prayer of your servants who desire to fear your name, and let your servant prosper this day, I pray, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. O Christendom, where are the prayers? With a sad countenance, the king inquired of his dilemma, and immediately God granted Nehemiah's prayer, by putting it into the heart of the king to grant Nehemiah license to return to Judah. The king sent him with escorts to assist his passage along with documents of authority. Nehemiah had the power of two kings, the king of heaven and the king of Persia, Iran. Passage was afforded him through the territories west of the Euphrates, but on his arrival, he recognized the danger of his mission. Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 10. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard of it, they were deeply disturbed that a man had come to seek the well-being of the children of Israel. Sanballat was a military man in the area and wished to keep the territory fearful and obeisant. He lived in Samaria and partnered with a government official, Tobiah, who had erected his own temple. Nonetheless, Nehemiah's presence was a threat to their control of the area and posed a serious threat to their power over Judah. Nehemiah was no neophyte to this kind of matter since he had been close to government authority and had encountered jealous intrigue. He arrived in Jerusalem and took caution. Nehemiah chapter 2 verses 11 through 16. So, I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me. I told no one what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem, nor was there any animal with me, except the one on which I rode. And I went out by night through the valley gate to the serpent well and the refuse gate, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem which were broken down and its gates which were burned with fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal under me to pass. So I went up in the night by the valley, and viewed the wall, then I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or the others who did the work. When someone has a mandate from heaven, he or she can count on opposition, both among associates and outsiders. Nehemiah confided in no one. Officially, he then took charge and gave his personal testimony of the favor of God, while challenging the leadership to rebuild the walls of the great city. The task took slightly over 50 days to accomplish, and that with great gusto. Enter the objectors. Using the tactics of ridicule and mockery, they harassed and took to task Nehemiah's leadership, by alluding he was plotting to rebel against the king. They accused them of being disloyal to his country and his superiors. Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 19. But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard of it, they laughed at us and despised us, and said, "What is this thing that you are doing? Will you rebel against the king?" Note: this triumvirate of demagogues is comprised of the military and those who represented officialdom and tribalism. Nehemiah answered them with the bold authority of heaven and even placed them outside the covenant while challenging their jurisdiction over Jerusalem. This acted like a spiritual curse. Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 20. So, I answered them, and said to them, "The God of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore, we his servants will arise and build, but you have no heritage or right or memorial in Jerusalem." After the work progressed in record time, Sanballat reappeared, along with the others, to continue their harassment, this time using innuendo and criticism. Nehemiah chapter 4 verses 1 and 2. But it so happened, when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, that he was furious and very indignant, and mocked the Jews. And he spoke before his brethren and the army of Samaria, and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish, stones that are burned?" He implies that the population is deplorable and feeble, saying they are weak and unable to complete their tasks. He castigates Nehemiah as one who is foolish to believe temple duties could resume and Jerusalem become, once again, the religious center for the Jews. Nehemiah was accused of trying to do the impossible, trying to make Jerusalem great again. Sanballat summoned his military regiment to order and vented his venomous anger, which caused him to be echoed by Tobiah, who also took the platform. Tobiah mocked, claiming the work done to this point was inferior and even a lowly fox could break through. Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 3. Now Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Whatever they build, If even a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall. Nehemiah's response was to pray and take dominion over their insults. Nehemiah chapter 4 verses 4 and 5. Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn their reproach on their own heads, and give them as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their iniquity, and do not let their sin be blotted out from before you, for they have provoked you to anger before the builders. The workers not only heard the objectors' words, but were swayed by the gossiping rumors that Sanballat, Tobias and the Arabs were threatening war. Nehemiah chapter 4 verses 7 and 8. Now it happened, when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to be closed, that they became very angry, and all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. Nehemiah's response again was prayer, but he also added military defensive actions. He posted guards and eventually took half the workers and made them swordsmen ready for battle. Nehemiah chapter 4 verse 10. Nevertheless we made our prayer to our God, and because of them we set a watch against them day and night. Tension rose in the camp of the Lord. Reports from within and without were rampant. Judah gave a report the workers were failing in their tasks. Jews who were outside the city came with reports of troop movement. 10 times they came with the troop reports, until Nehemiah conscripted everyone to fight for their lives. But God. Reports came back to the invaders that God had revealed their plot. Nehemiah chapter 4 verses 15 and 16. And it happened, when our enemies heard that it was known to us, and that God had brought their plot to nothing, that all of us returned to the wall, everyone to his work. So it was, from that time on, that half of my servants worked at construction, while the other half held the spears, the shields, the bows, and war armor. Nehemiah rose to the occasion and encouraged the discouraged and told everyone, if we are invaded, we will sound the trumpet and every man will know our God will fight for us. Something interesting surfaced shortly after this declaration. Injustices began to surface and Nehemiah was confronted with corruption in the highest levels of his government. The nobles were allowing the people to mortgage their properties just to stay alive in the difficult times. The ladies spelled out how their sons were being taken for payments in arrears. Others revealed the exorbitant usury being exacted. Nehemiah jumped right in and took the nobles to task, implying God would not fight to preserve that kind of behavior. The nobles agreed to a covenant of restoration and pledged to release their brethren from indebtedness. Nehemiah turned to the priests and, after informing them of the nobles' agreement, demanded them to also swear to do the same. He then declared a curse on anyone that did not carry through on their promise. Nehemiah chapter 5 verse 4. Then I shook out the fold of my garment and said, So may God shake out each man from his house, and from his property, who does not perform this promise. Even thus may he be shaken out and emptied. Then, he showed his own good faith by not taking pay for his work and did not do as others before him who exacted high taxes to serve them. Nehemiah chapter 5 verses 18 and 19. I did not demand the governor's provisions, because the bondage was heavy on this people. Remember me, my God, for good, according to all that I have done for this people. At all times, it is requisite for God's people to straighten out their lives and walk uprightly with their God. Sin in the camp is a dangerous quantity and must be rectified. Nehemiah knew it. Wouldn't you know, if Satan can't get to Judah internally, he will attack externally. Again, the despicable triumvirate enters with another plot with a scheme to promote compromise. They accused Nehemiah of seeking to overthrow the Persian government and establish a kingship of his own in Judah. Blackmailing him, they offered 5 times to meet with him and work out some agreement or else they would go to the king that sent him. Nehemiah's answer was always the same, no. He then went to prayer. Nehemiah chapter 6 verses 5 through 9. Then Sanballat sent his servant to me as before, the fifth time, with an open letter in his hand. In it was written, "It is reported among the nations, and Geshem says, that you and the Jews plan to rebel. Therefore, according to these rumors, you are rebuilding the wall, that you may be their king. And you have also appointed prophets to proclaim concerning you at Jerusalem, saying, there is a king in Judah. Now these matters will be reported to the king. So come, therefore, and let us consult together." Then I sent to him, saying, "No such things as you say are being done, but you invent them in your own heart." For they all were trying to make us afraid, saying, "Their hands will be weakened in the work, and it will not be done." Now therefore, O God, strengthen my hands. Don't you just love that anonymous sources were being used to establish untruth? This sounds like the New York Times or the Daily Mail or 10,000 news media spreading rumor from leaks by anonymous sources. One of the basic propaganda techniques is to claim a large constituency. In this case, it is reported among the nations. Solomon was correct, there is nothing new under the sun. Each of the devices of the enemy are bent on one thing, to stop God's people from doing God's work. Couple their threats with traitorous actors in the inner circle of the camp. This next offer to come to the temple comes from internal opposition. Nehemiah chapter 6 verses 10 through 14. Afterward I came to the house of Shemaiah the son of Delaiah, the son of Metabel, who was a secret informer, and he said, "Let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you. Indeed, at night they will come to kill you." And I said, "Should such a man as I flee? And who is the such as I who would go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in." Then I perceived that God had not sent him at all, but that he pronounced this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. For this reason he was hired, that I should be afraid and act that way and sin, so that they might have cause for an evil report, that they might reproach me. My God, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these their works, and the prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who would have made me afraid. Spiritual discernment must be the constant friend of leadership. Here, a spy clothed in Judah's clothes, did the work of evil men while cloaking his argument in prophecy. Verse 14 was a magnificent response. Like the one before it and those coming after, it was not a loving answer bathed in humility. Too bad Twitter didn't exist in Nehemiah's day. Nehemiah kept focused on completing his work, and the end result was his opponents became discouraged, for they knew who did the work, Judah's God. Nehemiah chapter 6 verses 15 and 16. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of Elul, in 52 days. And it happened, when all our enemies heard of it, and all the nations around us saw these things, that they were very disheartened in their own eyes, for they perceived that this work was done by our God. Couldn't happen to a better bunch, eh? Unfortunately, treachery again surfaced in the camp. Those guys who made up the inner council began to show their real colors, and God gave revelation to Nehemiah on how to draw them out. Nehemiah chapter 6 verses 17 through 19. Also in those days the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and the letters of Tobiah came to them. For many in Judah were pledged to him, because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah the son of Arah, and his son Jehohanan had married the daughter of Meshullam the son of Berechiah. Also they reported his good deeds before me, and reported my words to him. Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. I can just imagine, they were telling Nehemiah, "These are not bad guys, they just really don't understand, let us arbitrate for you. We know them better than you. We can work this out with them. Just trust us as nobles to intervene in your behalf." Sound familiar? All the while, They were pumping information about the progress of the wall and how discouraged the people really were and what a job Nehemiah had holding things together against internal opposition. Such treachery remains in the ranks of government and religion today. These nobles lost all credibility with the people and Nehemiah, so they were not chosen to preside over Jerusalem and its fortified walls. However, it shaped Nehemiah's direction for his next moves to guarantee loyalty. He appointed Hananiah, took a census to discover who actually was a bloodline Jew and caused the opening of the books of the law and commanded obedience to them. 1. The appointment of Hanani and Hananiah. Nehemiah chapter 7 verse 2. I gave the charge of Jerusalem to my brother Hanani, and Hananiah the leader of the citadel, for he was a faithful man and feared God more than many. 2. The taking of a census. Nehemiah chapter 7 verses 61 through 65. And these were the ones who came up from Tel Melah, Tel Harshor, Sherab, Adon, and Immer, but they could not identify their father's house nor their lineage, whether they were of Israel, the sons of Delaiah, the sons of Tobiah, the sons of Nekoda, 642, and of the priests, the sons of Habaiah, the sons of Kos, the sons of Barzillai, who took a wife of the daughters of Barzillai the Gileadite, and was called by their name. These sought their listing among those who were registered by genealogy, but it was not found, therefore, they were excluded from the priesthood as defiled. And the governor said to them that they should not eat of the most holy things till a priest could consult with the Urim and Thummim. 3. The reading of the law. Nehemiah chapter 8 verses 7 through 12. This took place after a great offering was taken. Jeshua, Bani, Sherebiah, Jamin, Akkub, Shabbatai, Hodijah, Maaseiah, Kelita, Azariah, Jozabad, Hanan, Pelaiah, and the Levites, helped the people to understand the law, and the people stood in their place. So they read distinctly from the book, in the law of God, and they gave the sense, and helped them to understand the reading. And Nehemiah, who was the governor, Ezra the priest and scribe, and the Levites who taught the people said to all the people, This day is holy to the Lord your God, do not mourn nor weep. For all the people wept, when they heard the words of the law. Then he said to them, Go your way, eat the fat, drink the sweet, and send portions to those for whom nothing is prepared, for this day is holy to our Lord. Do not sorrow, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. So the Levites quieted all the people, saying, Be still, for the day is holy, do not be grieved. And all the people went their way to eat and drink, to send portions and rejoice greatly, because they understood the words that were declared to them. Because of this action, an awakening took place among the people. God consciousness came upon them and the reading of the word penetrated their hearts. Think of it, these are the workers who sacrificed time, effort and money to accomplish the temple and its walls, but often these kinds of deeds do not approximate what an awakening to God will do. This kind of an awakening needs to cross the globe. Nehemiah chapter 9 verses 1 through 3. Now on the 24th day of this month the children of Israel were assembled with fasting, in sackcloth, and with dust on their heads. Then those of Israelite lineage separated themselves from all foreigners, and they stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their fathers. And they stood up in their place and read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for 1/4 of the day, and for another 1/4 they confessed and worshipped the Lord their God. As someone has said, things got seriouser and seriouser. Some of the preachers got into the mix and cried out to the people. Nehemiah chapter 9 verses 4 and 5. Then Jeshua, Bani, Kadmiel, Shebaniah, Bani, Sherebiah, Bani, and Chenani stood on the stairs of the Levites and cried out with a loud voice to the Lord their God. And the Levites, Jeshua, Kadmiel, Bani, Hashabniah, Sherebiah, Hodijah, Shebaniah, and Pethiah, said, Stand up and bless the Lord your God. Forever and ever. Blessed be your glorious name. which is exalted above all blessing and praise." Then they recited the wonderful works of their God which had taken place in the past. They confessed their sins, the sins of their fathers, and cried out for forgiveness. It's a wondrous day when the church leadership gets it right. That's why there must be an awakening, because just a protracted meeting or a weekend revival won't cut it. From the response by the people emerged a covenant with a promise. Nehemiah chapter 10 verses 28 through 30. Now the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, the Nethinim, and all those who had separated themselves from the peoples of the lands to the law of God, their wives, their sons, and their daughters, everyone who had knowledge and understanding, these joined with their brethren, their nobles, and entered into a curse and an oath to walk in God's law, which was given by Moses the servant of God, and to observe and do all the commandments of the Lord our Lord, and his ordinances and his statutes. With the hearts of the people clean, the time came to dedicate the temple and the walls, so Nehemiah caused a celebration involving all the people, and a great time it was for all. When the heart is free, the soul can soar. The people were spiritually free to reinstitute the Feast of Tabernacles and to engage everyone in rites of holiness, but even with all this and all their good intentions, there were carryovers of sin that marked their future. One of those carryovers was interaction with Tobias, who once again invaded the scene. This incident involved the high priest, Eliashib. Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 4 and 5. Now before this, Eliashib the priest, having authority over the storerooms of the house of our God, was allied with Tobiah. And he had prepared for him a large room, where previously they had stored the grain offerings, the frankincense, the articles, the tithes of grain, the new wine and oil. No one raised an issue when this objector was introduced to the temple, defiling it with his presence. After all, it was the responsibility of the high priest to determine the works of the temple. When pastors and church leaders introduce factors that affect the holiness of their sanctuary, few raise issue these days either. About this time, Nehemiah returned to Persia and spent time back in the court of the king before re-entering Judah, only to discover the intrigue perpetrated by Eliashib. Nehemiah took immediate action. He tossed out Tobiah and all his belongings. He ordered the place once occupied by Tobiah physically cleaned and spiritually cleansed as well. There are some folk the man of God must not tolerate. Obstructionist Tobiah was one of them. Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 6 through 9. But during all this I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes king of Babylon I had returned to the king. Then after certain days I obtained leave from the king, and I came to Jerusalem and discovered the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah, in preparing a room for him in the courts of the house of God. And it grieved me bitterly, therefore, I threw all the household goods of Tobiah out of the room. Then I commanded them to cleanse the rooms, and I brought back into them the articles of the house of God, with the grain offering and the frankincense. During Nehemiah's absence, the prophet Malachi preached messages about returning to God and reconstituting the tithe among the people. His strong message agreed with Nehemiah, and when he returned, it caused him to demand the leadership and those they represented to adhere to Malachi's words. Nehemiah met immediate resistance to his commands, which only tightened his resolve to bring spiritual alignment with the word of the Lord. This required him to observe the culture that had developed in his absence. After all, he was the governor, not a priest or a prophet. Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 10 through 13. I also realized that the portions for the Levites had not been given them, for each of the Levites and the singers who did the work had gone back to his field. So I contended with the rulers, and said, "Why is the house of God forsaken?" And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Then all Judah brought the tithe of the grain and the new wine and the oil to the storehouse. And I appointed as treasurers over the storehouse Shelemiah the priest and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites, Pedaiah, and next to them was Hanan the son of Zaccur, the son of Mattaniah, for they were considered faithful, and their task was to distribute to their brethren. Realizing the depth of neglect of God's house is one thing, doing something about it is another. Nehemiah sprang into action by assembling the responsible parties and commanding them to clean up their act. This was not popular. Notice the name Zadok, for their lineage always is associated with righteousness. Nehemiah turned to prayer in verse 14, also in verse 22 and in verses 29 and 30. Nehemiah chapter 13 verse 14. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and do not wipe out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God, and for its services. Many times, the man of God must do battle with the establishment, sometimes referred to as the deep state. Nehemiah contended with the establishment of his day, this time for allowing the profanation of the Sabbath. Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 17 and 18. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said to them, What evil thing is this that you do, by which you profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do thus, and did not our God bring all this disaster on us and on this city? Yet you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath. The governor took charge over the business enterprises working on the Sabbath by shutting down the wine presses, the flea merchants and other businesses operating within the walls of Jerusalem on the Lord's day. Note, in Jesus' day, he cleansed the temple once again. Nehemiah chapter 13 verse 19 through 22. So it was, at the gates of Jerusalem, as it began to be dark before the Sabbath, that I commanded the gates to be shut, and charged that they must not be opened till after the Sabbath. Then I posted some of my servants at the gates, so that no burdens would be brought in on the Sabbath day. Now the merchants and sellers of all kinds of wares lodged outside Jerusalem one sought wise. Then I warned them, and said to them, Why do you spend the night around the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time on they came no more on the Sabbath. And I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should go and guard the gates, to sanctify the Sabbath day. Then it happened, a special anointing rose up in Nehemiah. Sometimes the anointing to slap hovers over the man of God and things get ugly quickly. Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 23 through 29. In those days I also saw Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. And half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and could not speak the language of Judah, but spoke according to the language of one or the other people. So I contended with them and cursed them, struck some of them and pulled out their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, You shall not give your daughters as wives to their sons, nor take their daughters for your sons or yourselves. Did not Solomon king of Israel sin by these things? Yet among many nations there was no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, pagan women caused even him to sin. Should we then hear of your doing all this great evil, transgressing against our God by marrying pagan women? And one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib the high priest, was a son-in-law of Sanballat the Horonite, therefore, I drove him from me. Then he prayed. Nehemiah chapter 13 verses 29 through 31. Remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. Thus I cleansed them of everything pagan. I also assigned duties to the priests and the Levites, each to his service, and to bringing the wood offering and the first fruits at appointed times. Remember me, O my God, for good. Nehemiah could then rest from his labor, for he could declare. Objections overruled. This concludes the video by Dr. C.R. Oliver presenting an in-depth study on Nehemiah chapters 1 through 13 entitled, Objections Overruled.